Hey everybody, Taz from Critical Thinking Anarchist here. So, all right, we've got episodes X-Men 97, episodes 5 and 6. They're Life Death Part 1 and 2. So I gotta say, these were the first ones where I was really like, wow, this is X-Men. This is kind of what it's about. I will say today's writers just have no ability for subtlety. They just don't know how to write subtlety. They really don't. But anyway, we'll go ahead and start. So starts off where Scott is being interviewed, or rather, the X-Men are being interviewed um, about the world, about mutants in the world, and they're trying to do a nice piece on it. So it starts off with Beast. And then you've got Rogue and Magneto and Gambit, and they're heading to Genosha. And Genosha is a whole new place compared to what they used to be. Oops, sorry about that. Madeline Pryor is suddenly one of the people over there. So apparently it's been a couple months. So they just kind of like really fast forward in time on this. And then again, this is part of the problem with having such a condensed season. This is something. It is a two-part episode. At least it's seeming like a two-part episode. It might actually take up the last half. But this is something that would either be a season finale and lead into the series season opening for the next season. In a typical thing, and everything would be spread out over a much larger period of time. But instead, it's not. It's again so condensed. But anyway, so yeah, Magneto and Rogue and Gambit are all there, and of course you got the UN, or the senator from the United States bringing in the UN to Genosha, and Genosha, it wants to become its own country. So Rogue and Gambit kind of take a look at this new place, at how Genosha really is, and then Scott gets interviewed. About not Miss Marvel, Marvel Girl, which I gotta say, again, I'm not a comic guy. I'm mostly a normie, but I loved the original X-Men cartoon, so I had no idea that Jean was Marvel Girl. I just always knew her as Jean Grey. They only ever called her Jean Grey in the original series. So they kind of go back, to Jean while they're interviewing Scott, and she's, saying, Logan finds her and he's like, so you're not comfortable with what's going on, with the interviews? And she's like, I don't even know which memories are mine, which are my clones. She's like, how can I interview honestly when I have no idea who I am? Which is kind of a good thing, but no subtlety. They're just like, look, this is what's going on with all these people. And she does this, she talks about how her and Scott faced the things, and she's like, and Logan's like, oh yeah, well yeah, I know, I get that, and she's like, all right, you were there, and they kind of go back and forth on their perspectives of the relationship and everything like that. And Jean is saying that Scott is what made her stay when she was the Phoenix. Scott is what held her back, or rather, she attached herself to Scott to hold herself back. Rather, I should say that. So I mean, again, lack of subtlety, but it was nice. It was kind of nice to see. She kisses Logan, and Logan's like, "Hey, these are the rules. You're with Scott. He's with you. Whether I like it or not is not an issue." He's like, "No, go talk to your overgrown Boy Scout," which is kind of a Logan thing to do. He's like, around Jean, at any rate, around Jean, that's who he is. And then this is kind of an odd one, because the interviewer asks about family life and about having a baby, and somehow she got all this information that they had a kid, which is Dr. Patient confidentiality. they shouldn't be able to get any of that. Scott goes off, and this is a very non-Scott, non-Cyclops, non-X-Men thing to happen. He goes off and he gets angry, and he blames it all on the humans, which isn't even true at all. It was all Sinister orchestrating this, and he knows it was all Sinister orchestrating this. So I don't quite understand why this was written this way, because it really doesn't make any sense. And in fact, it doesn't even further the plot, really, outside of one little thing, and it really doesn't make any sense. So they had to go back to Genosha, and they want Magneto to be the Chancellor of Genosha. And he goes, okay, and again, they kind of do this whole thing on lack of subtlety. A lot of exposition, a lot of spoken exposition, which is what really makes the first half of this episode so I don't want to say bad. It's not bad, but so tough to go through, because you're like, again, the original was not full of this exposition. That's today. Today's writers only know how to do things through exposition. They don't know how to show without telling. They need to tell you everything. So anyway, the whole thing with Magneto is he wants Rogue to be the queen, and she's like, "Oh, you take me for a fool. You want us to get back together." So they parallels the Scott and Jean thing. Well, Scott talks to Jean about Nathan, and then we find out, oh crap, it's not actually Jean, it's Madeline. It's Madeline Pryor. And Jean breaks into their minds and is like, how long has this been going on? So she confronts Scott about all this, and they go on. And then, of course, they all feel a mental attack. Rogue goes on a gambit about her origins and why she got together with Magneto at one point. So this is pre-X-Men. This is why we never saw it in the X-Men. This is why we never saw any of that. I think this was written later, and they're retconning it into the show. And apparently with Magneto's electromagnetic powers, he forms kind of a force field around himself so that he can touch Rogue. And so Gambit says, I love you, but if you have any sort of feelings for him, that's it. You're with him. You can't touch me. You can't be with me. We're just friends. So then we be friends until you can figure out what you want in life. And so we go on, and there's another party, and of course there's more dancing because current day loves dancing for some reason. So Rogue comes in, she flies with Magneto. Madeline Pryor talks to Gambit a little bit about what's going on. So again, more parallels for no reason whatsoever. And then Rogue says, oh, guess what? It's not worth losing Gambit. Again, this is all convoluted as heck. So again, now we're at 2/3 of the way through, and this whole episode, you're just sitting there going, I don't understand any of this. I don't like it. Gets you, it moves you, but you're sitting there going, this isn't X-Men. This is a romance novel in the style of X-Men. We got more fireworks, and then we get Cable seeing Madeline Pryor. For those who don't know, Cable is Nathan from the future. Cable is Nathan Summers. So Scott Summers and Madeline Pryor's son, the one who was brought to the future. He is their child growing up. And he finds Madeline and tries to warn her that they're coming, or that he's coming. But just as, of course, he's warning her, his slide is up, and he has to go back. So he goes back into the future And of course, everybody's confused. And then big explosion. And we're left. We don't know what's going on. Rogue gets up, wanting tarnation. And it is a giant sentinel. Godzilla, as Gambit puts it, it's a Godzilla sentinel. And they use the old War of the Worlds, 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s ray gun sound. So it's kind of a cool callback there. And they leave it in mystery for a little while, so you don't quite see what it is. Kurt, Nightcrawler, shows up, and he's been there, this entire time. I forgot about that one. But Nightcrawler's there. He kind of helps him out, but he as everything is happening, there's so much confusion, so much thing, and I don't know if he got hit by the blast or if because he touched Rogue, but Rogue doesn't show any of his power, so they don't really show any of that on this particular one. I guess we'll kind of see in the next, but they didn't use any of it, so that would have been kind of an interesting dynamic there if they had. Gambit and Rogue try to, go out and help out. Magneto is doing what he can to help out. He uses a train monorail as a whip. You got the Morlocks, who are about to be killed by a Sentinel, and then Gambit comes in with Rogue and destroys the Sentinel head and frees the Morlocks. Magneto trying to help everybody out. He protects the Morlocks, protects Rogue and Gambit in a different place because the Sentinel is going strictly after Magneto because Magneto is an Omega level threat. We don't know what happens. There's a giant explosion. And Gambit tries to go after him. Rogue tries to go after him. Gambit stops Rogue. And then Gambit tries to go after himself. The Sentinel grabs Gambit. And of course he does what I hoped he would. And he energizes the thing that's holding on to him. And just awesome explosion. Destroys the Sentinel completely. Because Gambit can energize anything and make it explode. So then the X-Men see this on the news. And they sit there, Rogue finds Gambit's body. As far as we know, Gambit's dead. And that's basically the end. But yeah, the X-Men are sitting there going, my God, what happened? How many? How many are dead? So on to the next one. Lifedeath Part 2. This one is so Lifedeath Part 1, for the first time, it really felt, just that last 7-8 minutes, it really felt like original X-Men. There were stakes. Finally, people were dying. You felt risk for anybody. So it really, really felt like an actual X-Men episode where someone is going to die. Someone could die. Someone did die. Lifedeath Part 2. So, again, kind of an interesting one. This is where I kind of wish I'm like this, again, I wish these were drawn out. This would have been a saga. This would have been kind of like the Phoenix Saga, where it's 8+ episodes. Starts off in space with the Shi'ar. And the Shi'ar fighting the Kree. So the Shi'ar fight the Kree, Gladiator, etc. Going through all the stuff here, and Lilandra calls and says she's going to get married to Charles. They save Charles. He was near death. They brought him into space. They saved Charles. It is a completely different voice actor. Sorry, I haven't gotten to who the voice actor is. But you can tell it's completely different than the original. Doesn't have the same the same voice, doesn't have the same calm demeanor. Not bad by any means. It's just one of those things where, like the rest of them who may sound different, you're just kind of sitting there like, just not the same. Just not the same. So anyway, go on. And they go on about their relationship and, everything. And they kind of say, pretend with me, play with me type of thing. It's kind of an odd dynamic. Everything is pretend. Everything is for show. And Charles is still paralyzed. It's only the suit, the exoskeleton, that's allowing him to move and all that. And Lilandra is, trying to get him to be her husband and be the ruler in space. Jump back to Storm and Forge, and Storm still has the demon. Forge is being infected. Storm's trying to treat him, and the demon is trying to convince her that everything's bad and she should just give up. And you can tell this is all a mind game. So it turns out she's still being held by the demon. Forge comes in with the Book of Magic, banishes the demon. And Storm and Forge... Storm talks to Forge, realizes, okay, we need to treat you as some other thing. Maybe there's something in your grandma's magic book that can tell us how to cure you. He says there is a magic cactus in a cave in the dark. All right, whatever. So they go to the cave and try to find the cactus. Meanwhile, we go back to Charles and Lilandra, and they discuss in front of the council how they want to rule. Her sister comes in and says, you have to give up your Earth, all your memories from being on Earth. Otherwise, how can we trust you with the Shi'ar? And Lilandra has no problem agreeing to it. Charles says he reluctantly agrees to it. But Lilandra is the one that has to do it. Charles speaks to Charles speaks to Gladiator about the origins of the Shi'ar. And he says, I don't understand how you can, they have a marriage as their origins. And he said, yes, but how can it be how can you say it united everything when you have to crush one side to save the other? That's not really uniting. Lilandra tries to convince Charles that this is the best thing for him. So then we jump back to Storm and Forge. Go into the cave. Now we jump back to Charles, and he's agreeing to give up his memories. And just as he's doing so, he gets reluctant on giving up the xmen. Lilandra's sister says, well, your reluctance means that we can't trust you. They start fighting. And Charles realizes, hey, I'm a super powerful mind mutant, so why don't I use my mind to teach you all a lesson? Again, lack of subtlety. Very on the nose. Jump back one more time to Storm and Forge. Storm is going through the cave, trying to find the cactus. She's in a very tight space. Now, if you remember, and they do mention it here, Storm is very, very, very claustrophobic. So because of her claustrophobia, the demon reappears. Now, again, this is all in her mind, and she realizes this is all in her mind. The only thing that's stopping her is her own fear, is her own self. As she's realizing this, the winds start kicking up within the cave. And she starts facing her fears, and she starts dealing with her fears. Again, it's a bit girl boss. It's a bit, lectury. But in this particular case, because she's already been through a lot of this, it's one of those things where taking in the larger picture, it makes complete and total sense, and it's completely fine. If you're just watching this, you never read the comics and you've never watched the original X-Men series, so all you have is 32 seconds of her being afraid of being claustrophobic. This is kind of terrible. Um, the only downside is it is a little too quick, but it is really cool. She becomes Mega Storm. Yeah, I don't know what this version of Storm is. She grows her hair back. She's in the black version of the suit, of her Storm suit. So she is the big bad once again. She goes back, defeats her demon, cures Forge with the stuff. And he says, okay, well, now that now that I'm cured and now that we're back together, everything is good and hunky dory again. He's like, so should we go to a tropical paradise? And she says, well, that would be something. But of course, turn on the TV and what do we see? But Genosha being destroyed. And that's the end of that portion so far. We come back to Xavier teaching the Shi'ar and shutting up Elandra's sister with an apple. It is a little funny. And again, we get the whole woke lecture thing. Why are we chopping others down? We should be inclusive, blah, blah, blah. But it does fit Charles. But again, it's just no subtlety at all. Just on the nose. So he goes on with his lecture and then looks over and sees the Earth, his globe, going through spinning and being destroyed. And then he sees Death and Gambit. And he thinks Gambit at first is doing this. And then Gambit dies. And he wakes up. Everybody comes through and he says, I have to leave. I have to go back to Earth. And she says, if you go back to Earth, you prove my sister right. And he says, Earth needs me. My X-Men need me. If that's the way it has to be, so be it. I can't stay here any longer. And so he leaves. And that's the end of that portion. And then in our last 2 minutes, we have the guy that created Master Mold screaming and running and saying, I gave you my DNA so you could use Master Mold, leave me alone. And of course, Mr. Sinister, if I can find him, Mr. Sinister is the one behind it all. And they've said Mr. Sinister is the super big bad in this one. So that is it for the first season, episodes 5 and 6, Life Death Part 1 and 2. I'm not sure if it will continue as Life Death 3 in the next one. And again, I'm going to wait until 2 weeks so we can just do 2 episodes and cover them all. So, but again, this is the first time that this really, 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 really felt like it was part of the original X-Men cartoon. Again, way too much exposition, way too much tell and not show, way too much just on the nose, but at least it felt like X-Men, not just in the style of X-Men. There are stakes, people are at risk, things are going on. So that is it for this one. I'm looking forward to episode 7. And of course, episode 8. So I will see you again in 2 weeks. In the meantime, let me know what you guys thought in the comments below. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Am I wrong on anything? You like being told everything that's going on. So if you did, go ahead, let me know in the comments below. In the meantime, I thank you again for watching, especially if you made it all 24 and a half minutes. Like, share, and subscribe if you would be so kind, and I will see you in 2 weeks with the next X-Men. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow for Jay's book. Bye, everybody.